It was the fall of 1992, a tour night. Outside the stadium, the crowds had been gathering since afternoon, but the real movement started after sunset. Behind the stage there were cables, black road cases, headsets, technicians moving fast, someone always counting down the minutes. Everyone had a job. And in that world, the rule was simple. You don't step into someone else's lane. That night, a crew member was stationed in the backstage corridor, the narrow passage that connected the loading area to the artist side of the stage. It wasn't glamorous work. He checked equipment positions, made sure doors didn't stay open. Watched the flow so nothing and no one crossed the wrong line at the wrong time. 20 minutes before showtime, the noise from the crowd swelled like a wave. It was that moment. Lights dim slightly, the bass tests the air, and the stands begin to move as one living thing. Backstage, you feel it through the concrete. The countdown becomes real. And that's when the unexpected walked in. A security guy came quickly around the corner, and he wasn't alone. 2 more guards were with him. Between them was a kid, 12 years old maybe. A hoodie that looked too big for his frame. A cardboard folder clutched tight against his chest. His face was pale, eyes wide, like he'd fallen into the wrong place and couldn't find the way out. That wasn't normal. Backstage doesn't work on hope. It works on lists, passes, wristbands, and permissions. If you don't belong there, the space rejects you immediately. One of the guards hurried up, breathing hard. This kid got in through the VIP gate, he said. He was with a woman. She said it was urgent. The woman's outside now. The kid's inside. Why would you let him through? The crew member asked. The guard's jaw tightened. He keeps saying he has to give something to Michael. He's shaking. He's crying. If we drag him out, it's going to turn into a scene. The crew member looked at the kid again. He wasn't acting. He was terrified. Not of getting caught, of not being heard. What's your name? The crew member asked him. The kid swallowed, lips barely moving. Ethan, what's in the folder? The crew member asked. The kid didn't answer. He just stared down the corridor toward the black door at the end, the door that led toward the private area. That door was always half closed. Someone always stood near it. Nobody drifted toward it by accident. One of the security guys muttered, 5 minutes to stage. We can't deal with this now. And right then, another voice came through the radios. Artist moving. Clear the hallway. Everyone shifted. That moment, right before the artist walks out, is like a ritual. Nobody talks, nobody stares. Everyone knows the concentration inside that walk. You don't interrupt it. And a few seconds later, Michael appeared. He didn't look like the version people carry in their heads from music videos. On stage, he was sharp, bright, precise. Back here, he looked thinner, quieter, more human. Part of the stage outfit was on, but not all of it. Someone was adjusting his in-ear cable. Every few steps he paused and took a slow breath, like he was gathering himself. He was surrounded by people, yet somehow, he still looked like someone walking alone. Michael's eyes landed on the kid in the center of the corridor. Normally a look like that would be a signal security removes the problem, but Michael stopped. He actually stopped. The corridor stopped with him. One of the crew members whispered, "Time." They were on the edge of the show. A single delay can throw off an entire set. Michael lifted his hand slightly. 1 minute, he said. A minute before showtime is expensive. But he took it anyway. He walked 2 steps closer to the kid. Not too close. No dramatic kneel, no performance. He simply leaned in until he was closer to the kid's eye level. "Hey," he said softly. "You okay?" Ethan nodded, but it wasn't a yes. It was more like he didn't know what to do with the question. He opened the folder. His hands shook. He pulled out a wrinkled, damp sheet of paper covered in drawings, an outline of a stage, lights, a figure in the middle. Michael's eyes stayed on that line. For a second it didn't make sense. If you're at a concert you can hear, right? Michael didn't take the paper from the kid's hand. He just read it. Then he looked at Ethan. "Tell me," he said, "what do you mean?" Ethan swallowed hard and pointed behind his ear. "A small device, an assisted hearing aid. When it's too loud," he said, struggling to keep his voice steady, "everything mixes. The music is good, but the screaming is too much." Michael nodded slowly. His face shifted like something old inside him had been touched. "Sometimes," he said quietly, "silence is louder." Ethan stared, unsure. Michael turned his head toward his crew. "Bring me the set list," he said. Someone ran. The list came back. Michael scanned it quickly, tapped a spot with his finger and handed it back. "Okay," he said. "I'll do it." A small panic moved through the crew. People exchanged looks. You don't rewrite moments when the machine is already rolling, but nobody argued, they just adjusted. Michael looked back at Ethan and reached into his pocket. He pulled out something small, foam ear protection, the kind you can squeeze and place into your ear. "Use this," he said, "and watch me." Ethan took it. But what he really took was the fact that he'd been seen. Michael touched the kid's shoulder lightly, just a brief, careful contact, and then he walked toward the stage entrance. The door opened. The sound of the crowd hit like heat. That roar is physical. It pushes against your chest. Michael stepped out, and the stadium exploded. Backstage snapped back into motion. Everyone moved to their positions. The crew member guided Ethan to a safe spot on the side where he could see the stage without being in anyone's way. Security didn't love it, but after Michael's 1 minute, nobody wanted to be the person who made that kid disappear. The show started. The first songs went by. Everything was running on track lights, pyro, dancers, the crowd screaming like a living storm. Ethan had the ear protection in, but he still flinched at the loud surges. Sometimes he tightened his shoulders. Sometimes he stared at his paper. Sometimes he stared at the stage like he was trying to pull the music out of the noise. About 40 minutes in, after a costume change, the show kept rolling smooth, powerful, exactly what people came for. Then, it happened. Normally, the end of one song blends into the next. A drum hits, bass enters, the whole stadium rises again. But that night, Michael lifted his hand. The music stopped. At first, people didn't understand. Some thought it was a planned break. The cheering actually got louder for a second, like the crowd was trying to fill the space. Michael raised the microphone, but he didn't speak. He just stood there. Second by second, the crew held. Musicians waited. Lighting operators hesitated, waiting for the cue, and Michael stayed still. After a few seconds, something impossible began to happen. The stadium started to quiet down. You have to understand, this wasn't a small theater, this was a sea of people. Tens of thousands of voices. And yet, as Michael held the silence, the wave of noise began to collapse. Less screaming, more breathing. Less chaos, more attention. It wasn't perfect silence, but it was a deep hush, heavy enough that you could feel it. Michael brought the microphone closer and said one word very softly, "Listen." And then, 1 full minute. No music, no speech, no performance. Just the sound of a massive place being still. The tiny sounds you never notice in a concert suddenly appeared. Someone crying, someone inhaling sharply. A flag snapping in the distance. The faint hum of the city beyond the walls. The crew member looked at Ethan. For the first time, his face didn't tighten. For the first time, he didn't shrink away. For the first time, he wasn't fighting the noise. He was just watching, because that minute was clear. That minute didn't drown him. It didn't blur into chaos. It didn't attack his ears. It gave him space. Then Michael lifted his fingers and tapped a slow tempo in the air. The band returned, not with a full blast, but with a single gentle entry. A simple line, then another. Then the song began. But even as the music returned, the feeling of that minute stayed in the air, like everyone had agreed to protect it. The show continued, and the crowd never fully went back to the same kind of screaming, at least not for a while. It was as if they'd been reminded that their sound mattered too. When the concert ended, backstage was buzzing. People were asking questions like they always do when something unusual happens. What was that? Was that planned? Did he change the set? Who was he doing that for? Some said it was showmanship. Some said it was control. Some said it was genius. Ethan didn't say much at all. After the final bow, the crew member guided Ethan toward the back exit where his mother was waiting. The moment she saw him, she grabbed him and started crying, scolding him between tears like mothers do when fear turns into relief. Ethan hugged her, but he kept looking over her shoulder back toward the corridor. And then he looked at the crew member. "I could hear," he said. "That was it. Not thank you, not I can't believe it, just I could hear." Because for him, the miracle wasn't meeting someone famous. The miracle was clarity. At that exact moment, the backstage door opened again. Michael stepped back inside. He had a towel around his neck, water in hand, sweat and exhaustion on his face. Crew surrounded him automatically, but his eyes lifted like he was searching for one specific point. He found Ethan, not the way a celebrity scans a crowd, the way someone recognizes a promise. Michael moved through the cluster of people and stopped a step away from Ethan. Ethan held out the paper. Michael didn't take it, just looked at it. Then he reached into his pocket and pulled out a pen. In the corner of the paper he drew a small mark, more like a symbol than a signature. Not something to sell, not something to frame, something to confirm. "I saw you." He looked at Ethan and said, "You did good." Ethan shook his head like, "I didn't do anything." Michael answered anyway. "Sometimes," he said, "the bravest thing is asking." Ethan's mother was still crying. Michael turned to her briefly, gave a small nod, and said, "He's strong." Then he looked back at Ethan and reached into his pocket again. This time he pulled out a small black piece of in-ear equipment, maybe a spare, maybe symbolic, maybe nothing important to anyone else. He held it out. "Keep it," he said, "for the noise." Ethan took it carefully, holding it like it wasn't plastic but a reminder. Michael paused for a second, then leaned slightly closer and said in a voice meant only for the kid, "Don't wait for the world to be quiet. Make your quiet." Ethan probably didn't fully understand the sentence at that moment, but it was the kind of sentence you understand years later. Michael straightened up, turned back to the crew, and walked away into the private hallway. And within minutes, the night turned into what all tour nights become, a memory people talk about differently depending on what they needed it to mean. For the crew member, that night wasn't just another date on the schedule. Because that night, the biggest thing that happened wasn't a dance move. It was a pause. Most stadium shows are remembered for the noise. That one was remembered for a minute of silence. Later, someone mentioned in an interview that Michael once held a stadium quiet for a full minute. Most people assumed it was a dramatic effect, a moment, a planned trick. But backstage, there was one kid who knew exactly why it happened. And in his hands was a crumpled sheet of paper with one sentence on it. "If you stop for 1 minute during the show, I can hear." Michael read it, and he stopped. That night, tens of thousands of people did something almost impossible together. They got quiet. And in that quiet, a kid said the music finally became clear. Sometimes an icon's greatest move isn't the fastest step. Sometimes it's doing nothing at all, just standing still. For 1 minute.